There you go. So yeah, because my intention is at the same time, talking to you as an expert, because the stuff that I read, like your name was everywhere, and people were telling me you have to talk to her, several like different people, because of the role you had. So you kind of like, I think, qualify as an expert in the issue because you were involved for so long and so closely and everything. But also, I am interested in kind of your experience in, as someone who was doing research and advocacy and activism all at the same time. Basically because, so my project, this is my doctoral project, which is on statelessness, broadly conceived, which is kind of for you as a lawyer, it sounds, I'm sure, different than it sounds for me as someone in social sciences. Because
you're in social sciences?
I'm in political science.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
Yeah, my major is in political theory and my minor is in international relations. So I'm like, I think kind of similar background. I have some of the background that Maya probably has, that I was talking to her last week, but also like the political theory part is you also like there were also people involved that are doing that. So that's also is very interesting how different the backgrounds of the people working on this are. So part of my project, is broadly on statelessness, but what I'm basically trying to understand also is I'm looking at different cases. Cases are like very different among them. That's something I'm doing kind of on purpose, because I feel that a lot of the research that has been done in statelessness is like either case-based or like region-based, and I'm trying to think about, the mechanisms that allow this to go on and on and on more broadly. Because, it's the states that are supposed to remedy it, but it's the states that are causing it. And so, I have some curiosity as to how that actually keeps happening, and how, sometimes from the remedies come like the conditions of possibility for that to happen again. Broadly conceived, right? Because as I was saying, like as a legal term, it means something, but then when you go into the social sciences, it's kind of a bigger umbrella. Like you often like see it, when people are like studying refugeehood, they are going to talk about statelessness as if it were like a, whereas for people in like legal scholars, it is a specific thing. So that's what I'm saying. But so part of my, my approach to like how is this happening over and over, part of my questions are like, what are the people who are working on this on the ground? How are they, the way they are constructing this object of knowledge and of advocacy, how is this, making a difference or not in terms of this like pre-production, basically. So that's where I come from, in my mindset. So that's why it was like like more a personal communication, but also an interview in terms of like, your experience and your, the struggles you found when you were trying to like navigate that kind of fine line between all these activities and with all the political load of it and everything. So yeah, because this is also an interview, then I have to say that protocol-wise, I was supposed to have like an information sheet for you, where it's like the description of the project, and then all the part where I tell you, basically you're in control of how much of what you say can be attributed to you or not. I assume that like you're someone who, you've been public before, like your name is associated with this, and you're probably not threatened to the extent that perhaps other scholars, right? So, but still, you like, if you're okay with it, I'm going to send you that by email, and then probably like leave you a copy of that somewhere where you can find it. So, and you'll see it's a bit like it's written for situations of all sorts.
Yeah,
so,
sure. It's fine.
And you can tell me, if you're comfortable with me taking notes or not. You know that, right? That you've done interviews and but I'm supposed to say it, so I want to make sure I do. And once I have the transcript, I can send it to you and you can take a look if you want. You don't need to, but you give me a password at the end of the interview, and then I send you the transcript with the password.
Sure.
And
Okay.
just to make sure, if I'm quoting you, I'm doing that properly. So yeah, all that said, all that introduction. So my first question is how you ended up in the and before I go on, okay, so you asked about my interest in the arrays particularly.
Yeah, how did you find the topic and why are you interested? Yeah.
So like I read a lot about cases that are considered like cases of statelessness in the world, like as I said, like very different cases, like in different regions, different languages, different cultures, different legal systems. It's like I'm looking at the Bidun in Kuwait. I'm looking at the Haitians or Dominicans of Haitian descent in the Dominican Republic. These are like different worlds, but so these cases that I'm looking at, I think there are certain connections between them that caught my attention, and I mean the arrays in particular. I think first of all the idea that someone can be erased, like when I read about the case in itself, it blew my mind. I was like, this is like but also how long it took for it to come to light. Like as I started reading about it, it just caught my attention, and the connections with the other cases. There's been very different situations. The fact that these are like migrant workers, that obviously there is like there is a race issue, but there's also like a transition between economies.
Everything happened at the same time. Yeah?
Everything happened at the same time with independence, which is also like connected with the other cases. But the fact that there were reparations eventually, like similarities, differences, and the more I read about it, the more like and the more I hear about it, the more I realize, because since what I'm trying to also think about is, about this issue broadly, and so when I think about the mechanisms, I'm trying to think about, the political economy of this as well. What does it mean for, these people not having access to housing anymore, these people not being able to have a job when I know that Yelka has written about this, Sarah has written about this, I'm going to talk to them.
Okay.
So that's where my interest basically come from.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my I already spoke a lot for
Yeah, now I'm ready. So we can start. You can tell me what you're interested in.
So how did this all start? Like, how did you end up?
Me.
Yes, and the Peace Institute, like in this kind of alliance of organizations working on this.
I think these are two separate stories. Let's start, So the Peace Institute has always been, since the very beginnings, interested in these kind of topics of, related to racism, nationalism, politics more generally. Vlasta Jalušić, you probably met her already.
I met her,
So
I read her, yeah.
Okay, and she's still working at the Peace Institute. So she's basically, and this is also her approach to studying the issues, so to be focused on these kind of things. So I think, I was not there at the time, so I cannot tell you exactly how the Peace Institute got involved with this. I know that there was that it's important to know that the topic itself was quite. I mean, it took for a very long time for the topic itself to came to the public because the erased people have been scattered. They felt alone. They didn't know there's a whole community behind it. They didn't know that that this was a massive measure that affected many of them. They all thought, oh, something happened to me because I made a mistake, or something happened to me because my parents forgot to, report my name and everything to the administrative office so that they would register me and so on. So they thought it's something to do with their own mistake that they themselves are responsible for and that they themselves have to fix. Yeah. So this is important to keep in mind. So that's why it took them so long to actually get organized. And it took a very stubborn individual, Alexander Todorovich, you probably saw his name around as well, who actually had enough of this limbo that he was caught into. And one day he called for a press conference and he told the reporters, not for the first time because he was trying before, but he called a press conference and he told the reporters that this is a massive problem, that he thinks he's not alone, that he knows for a couple of other people because he was talking to people a lot in personal contacts, and he actually met a couple of others. So it came to his mind that this is not an individual problem, that this is a systemic problem. He published his phone number. He asked the TV crew to publish his phone number at the interview, so people started calling him. And that's how the first association became formed. The first group of people came together like that, and the first association became formed. It wasn't that the erased people didn't try before. They contacted some human rights organization before, specifically the Helsinki Committee of Human Rights. It's one of the Helsinki hubs, but the one in Slovenia was only active at the time. Today, since I've been around at the scene, like since 2001, for instance, I haven't really cooperated with them because it's not really a functioning organization anymore. But apparently it was at the time, so they handled many cases of the erased people, and those who were the most active were former military staff. They were the most educated, and they were also connected. You know that there was a Yugoslav National Army, and so that's why the erasure was very early on connected. I mean, the perception of the public was that the erasure is connected to the military situation. It's very important to say that because it was also some kind of a stigma that was very difficult to oppose. So because these people were the ones who got organized and got connected among each other in the beginning, so in the early 90s already. And they were also the ones who managed to file the first constitutional court complaints on this issue. So all of this was happening already in the 90s, but it wasn't that public yet. So it actually became public in the late 90s. Do you have my PhD on this? It's in English also.
Yeah, the book.
The yellow one.
Yes, you mean like this book that's called Erased? That's your thesis, right? Yes, I've been reading it. Yes.
Okay, so a lot of it is found.
I know. Yes.
So I'm not going to repeat that.
Yes.
Okay. So Vlasta will tell you more how the Peace Institute got involved with that, so it's better to ask her.
Okay.
But I know that they were aware of the issue, and they especially became aware when Alexander Todorovich went public.
Okay.
Because some of the people who were involved with the Peace Institute at the time, they had this idea that some research has to be done. So they recruited Jelka, Zoran, and Jasminka Dedic.
Okay.
Jasminka Dedic. She's also a co-author of one of the books.
Yeah.
The Organized Innocence and the Politics of Exclusion. Okay. That's the first one. So they did some kind of fellowships, research fellowships. Each of them did one, and then they contributed 2 big chapters for this book, and Vlasta wrote the theoretical part. So that's how the Peace Institute, as the research organization, got involved. They basically got to know all the main details that they had to know, so that they came to a conclusion that it was a systemic problem, that it had a huge effect on people, that it wasn't right, that it had constitutional rights implications, So the basics were there, done with this book and with this first research that was done within the Peace Institute. And then I think that when this project stopped, because the Peace Institute at the time already had a lot of core funding, so they basically could choose what kind of research they were going to fund.
What do you call core funding?
Core funding, there was a big grant coming from the Open Society Foundation.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
This is it. So they basically were the ones that allocated this fund. They said, okay, we have this huge part of this funding that we can allocate for some kind of research. Let's select the topic. And this is how they allocated the money for this first research, so that 3 people could actually start to work on this in the beginning. Okay, so then I think this money was allocated to some other things, but they all of a sudden they had all this information at their disposal. So it was very important that somebody continues to work on that. So when I came back to Slovenia, I was already in touch with the Peace Institute, and they needed somebody to take over these non-discrimination projects because they were very legal and they didn't have any lawyers employed. So when I came back, I came to work on this non-discrimination project. But at the same time, the director of the time, Leo Kreft, he was also focusing on this issue a lot, even though he was employed for a part-time. He was a full-time professor at the Faculty of Arts, but a part-time director of the Peace Institute. But in the past, actually at the independence, he was a member of the parliament. So he was already paying attention to the legislative part, legislative reasons for erasure, when he was in the parliament. So his team tried to prevent the erasure, if you can imagine.
He tried to prevent
the erasure because they noticed that something's wrong with the legislation that they were going to pass, and they were filing for amendments together with Metka Mencin. Metka Mencin is the name of the person who signed under the amendments. She was his colleague, the member of the same party in the parliament at the independence in the early 90s. And they noticed that something was wrong with the legislation, that it had these loopholes that are going to result in the unregulated legal status of some people. So he carried on this story from the early 90s into the Peace Institute when he became the director. So he always wanted to do something, not just the research, but to have some kind of an advocacy project that would really, really intensively work on this issue. So I know that they were talking to the Open Society Foundations about the additional grant that the Peace Institute would receive to work on this issue very specifically. Not to use the grant that was already there, but to get the additional money, because they all understood that it's a very big topic, that it's going to require a lot of resources, and that the Peace Institute already had lots of people employed, and the grant was needed for that. So that was the idea. So we finally, when I was already working, I was talking to our director about that, and we got some kind of positive feedback that yes, they are willing, from the Open Society Foundations, that they are willing to fund the project like that, and they were inviting us to submit an application. So this is how the Peace Institute kind of got involved, according to my understanding. But Vlasta will give you more details because she was there before. She was there all the time, so she will know exactly why, and she was the motor behind it. Yeah, so she. Right. I was somebody who came later. I came into this.
Right. Right.
When all of this got really, really publicized. The first time I heard about the erased, I'm going one step back. The first time I heard about the erased was when I probably read something in the newspapers before that even, but it didn't really stick to my mind. It was something I didn't really understand. Nothing was discussed about this in law school, so we had no idea, absolutely no idea. And then my first job was at the Legal Information Center for NGOs.
Okay.
PIC.
I've seen the name.
So this was my first job. I actually started cooperating with them on the refugee law issues. because I was involved in the asylum law clinic at the law
Yes,
faculty,
okay.
and that's how I got to know my mentor. She was a former Bosnian refugee and a former judge from Bosnia who fled to Slovenia during the war, the Balkan War, the war in Bosnia, in Herzegovina, and she got involved with the refugee law, and she became a mentor, and I was the student, and I had her for a mentor. So when I and this whole thing, the practical part of the clinic was taking place in PIC, PIC,
Yes.
the NGO. So when I graduated in 2002. I got an offer from PITS to start working there, and I said yes. And the project was legal assistance for asylum seekers, refugees, and Roma. Everything in the same basket. And when we were doing the legal assistance to asylum seekers, all of a sudden we realized we have some erased people among them. So people were trying to regulate their status in a different kind of ways, and some of them were from the group of the erased people. And that's the first time I heard, like I personally got involved with this, because my mentor said, you know, this person that we just talked to, he belongs to the group of the erased people. I'm like, what is that? You know, I didn't really understand. So I remember this moment very clearly, but then I didn't really work on the erasure as such. What happened was that then I left because I got this fellowship to study in the US. So I went to do my master's, and while I was there, I was monitoring the media. I was, reading the news from my home country and stuff. And during my absence, this became a really, really heated discussion because it was 2004 when the main referendum took place, where all the the second constitutional court decision came out. All of that was happening. Yeah, so that's when the topic became really, really heated. So I became aware that it's a really, disgraceful way in which the politicians are dealing with this topic, because they were stigmatizing people, and at the same time, the stories started to come out that had nothing to do with military. So it became clear to me, so it's not about that, yeah. So this was kind of like piling up in my head, and then I came back and I was working on something completely different when I was in the US. I mean, it was international human rights law, but on different focuses: genocide, crimes against humanity, these kind of things, the South American regimes, Pinochet, this was what I was working on, studying. So I have to say that when I came back, I was ready for very difficult topics because, and in between, I was doing the internship in Human Rights Watch in New York, working on international justice, which is precisely like, responsibility of military for the crimes, the ICTY. I was following the International Criminal Court from Yugoslavia work. So when I came back, I was like, okay,
I'm ready for the work.
I'm ready for some very difficult things to do. So just, bring it on, yeah? And so when I came back, the Peace Institute, as I said, they needed somebody to work on non-discrimination. I was like, no, this is so boring. It's very basic, it's not difficult enough for me. And when they started talking about a project on the erased people, I was like, yeah, no problem, just give it to me. And everybody else was like, oh, I don't really want to work on that. I was like, yeah, give it to me.
Why the others didn't want
I mean, maybe they wanted to, but they had different priorities. So like, I want to work on media, I want to work on gender, I want to work on people have different interests. Yeah. And when I came, there was nobody else who would be really, really willing to take this on, and I was the one who did it. Yeah. So we prepared an application. We filed it to we submitted it to the Open Society Foundations, and we received a 3-year grant of 100,000 per year. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I have a big project now, so let's start. And that's it. So it was a lot of money. So it was very important to figure out what are we going to do with this. So from the beginning, I had this idea that we have to work on several strands at the same time, because only one path is not going to lead anywhere. It's not going to be successful. It was such a big. This was very intuitive. I have a legal training, so but probably the experience from the masters and the Human Rights Watch, it was apparently piling up, so I could use it. Yeah. So I said, okay, first of all, we have to document the stories, because I mean, it's not just my problem. Now I sound like it's my idea.
No, but
it's always like the group talk, and then you get these ideas and all that. Yeah. So we said we have to document the stories, because everybody's saying that this has nothing to do with ordinary people. everybody's saying this is about, military officials who were trying to undermine the independence of Slovenia, and they were even fighting against it. They were holding arms, and now they want citizenship and all that. So I said, no, we have to document these stories and show that these are women, children, workers, and people working in factories, very ordinary people who, of course, usually of lower social class, usually very bad, like waiters, kind of like poor, not poor, I wouldn't say poor, but working class, just working class people, of migrant descent, all of them, or 99%, so this is one thing. The second thing we have to do the legal analysis based on the Constitutional Court decisions, and we have to continue. So we have to show that, we have to use the law that we have, because it's all there, to show that this is really a really human rights violation. Of course, the Constitutional Court did this already to some extent, but there was so much more to say. So, we continued in that area. The third thing that we wanted to do was litigation. So we set up first legal counseling and then litigation. So we set up some kind of information office where people could come with regulated status, with unregulated status, in the procedures and so on. We did that. So hundreds of people came to our office, on a yearly basis. One day one person came, there was one day when 5 people came, and then nobody came for a week. But constantly we had this basically on the phone line and all of that, so people could come and they could get information in a specialized place. So this way we got contacts from, I think altogether at least 2,000 people during the years, who were in this process.
That's the number that Maya gave me too,
For some of them, we were filing applications, or we were representing them, or we helped them to do it. The problem was that for many years, there was a gap when this was not possible, because the deadline expired. But actually, when we when we actually started to work, the deadline was open again, because the Constitutional Court said that the 3-month deadline was unconstitutional. So it was again open, so people could start filing again. So they came to us, we helped them out, and so on. So this was the information point, the legal counseling. And then we also represented some of them in courts, because they were unsuccessful because of Ministry of Interior policy, which was very restrictive, and it still is. So there a lot of litigation was required because of that as well. So each case we were working on that. And then I remember very clearly when we were, of course, reporting to the Open Society Foundations about our work, and they were like, okay, so how many statuses did you get for the people at some point? And I was like, I think we got like 12. And I was so excited because it was a huge success. It was such a battle, and each case was a project on its own. You know how it is. You have 12 cases. And I was like, what? This is so low. And I'm like, you have no idea. What are we against? What are we dealing with here? It's a wall. It's a wall. So
it's all done so that you cannot do it.
Yeah, exactly. So don't say it's not a lot, because it is. So we needed to raise awareness of them as well. That it's if the state decides to do something, they succeed. I mean. It's a huge machinery you're fighting. It's not like you give me $100,000 and I'm gonna resolve the problem. No, everybody is against it, except for us, like the group of 10 people maybe.
So it's an interesting expression that you say it's a wall. That's why I wrote it down. So when you say it's a wall, like, could you mention some of the what is that wall made of? Like, what were these like constant frustrations that you were bumping into? Like the main ones, or
the state
whatever.
administration. That's the first thing. So it's like the whole apparatus was in agreement that everything possible had to be done to prevent people from regulating their legal status. And you can see how it looks as if it was coordinated, even though it's not really, because it's not possible to coordinate that many people. There's no central force that coordinates. You know what I mean? But when something becomes such a big stigma, and it becomes so intertwined with society and with all the state bodies, you don't need to coordinate anymore because everything is just happening in the direction that you foresaw 20 years ago. Yeah? So this is one. So you go to the administrative office, the local one, and you get this attitude of, just don't try. Yeah? And then you go to the ministry and you get the same attitude, just leave the topic. Why are you still dealing with this? And you meet with people.
You mean like in your position, like as like
as a human rights advocate,
yes,
for instance, and then you get lectures. You go for a meeting with the state secretary or the director of some of the directorates or whatever, officials, and you get lectures. Oh, you're so young. Let me tell you about this.
That's why I ask. And woman, young. That's why I ask. Yeah.
Let me tell you about this. In 1990, how old
Plus,
were you?
you came from the States.
Oh, you were in the 5th
also.
grade. Okay. Let me tell you something. And you get lectured. So I remember a moment when I interrupted a guy who was like 60, and I said, please stop lecturing me. I know everything about this, and now we're talking about something else. We're talking about the mistake that you made, and we need to fix it. Yeah, so let's talk about how we're going to fix it. I don't need a lecture. I know everything that I need to know about this. Yeah, and so this is what was happening. So this, then the general public, you can see if there was an article online, and then you read the comments. Yeah, and everything is negative. Everything is negative from the first to the last. So you can see that you're opposing basically the public opinion that has a completely different point of view than the human rights point of view, because it was years and years and years of political manipulation, of sending messages that created this kind of public opinion. So you feel very, very alone. You feel like there's us, 10 people working on this, and everybody else has a different opinion, or there's a large gray majority that doesn't care. Yeah. Then, so this is the second thing, the second element of the wall, if you want. The third element is the politicians themselves, how they were using this topic to gain political points. It was so popular to say, oh, these manipulators, oh, these military personnel, they wanted to prevent Slovenia from becoming independent, and now they want citizenship, and so on. Yeah. So, I have to say that during this time, the only positive element was the media, more or less. Not everybody, but
there were voices.
Yes, there was a big number of journalists who understood, who felt the injustice, and who understood that it's important to keep on publishing the stories, to keep the topic on the agenda, not to ignore us. And we really needed the media, because whenever we had public events or the week of the erase around February 26th, when it's commemorated every year. You need the media. You need them to come and to report that there's this event, there was this public round table. They publish an interview, they publish stories, they continue to look for the erased people who haven't spoken up yet, and try to convince them, why don't you tell your story as well. So they were doing that, and this was really helpful, because without the media you cannot reach anybody outside of your circle. And we had this support. There were a couple of journalists, and that was enough. Like, for instance, 5 that I worked with intensively during this time. So that, and then at the same time, I think it also helped that so many people from the universities. Okay, so now this is not the wall anymore. But I think basically it was the legal part, the administrative part, the public opinion, and the political. This was 4 components. I mean, I'm making this up now now, but I would say about 4 components of this wall were there.
Yeah. So when so just to take you straight to the you were at the PCC until a year ago. When was the work and the alliance between the organizations over, and why was it over in a way? Because the feeling I get is that now it's it's an issue of the past, right? I want to understand how you get to that point, because it's not necessarily clear in my mind that the reparations were not actually reparatory of any
Yeah,
sort.
yeah, sure,
A lot
yeah.
of stuff like kept happening. There were like groups that were not recognized at arrays that went through similar similar techniques of like, you know,
Yeah.
disappearance by the state. So when did was it a question of like the money for the project over like the what is your
Yeah, it's probably related to three things. The first thing is that the movement also disappeared a little bit.
okay?
The movement itself, with the death of Alexander Todorovic, who committed suicide.
I guess the Swiss, like, was he? Well, I don't know. This is not a kid issue, but like, I didn't know he had committed suicide until someone mentioned it to me. It's like, obviously, this is related to all that.
Yeah, I'm sure he lived for this. So I had the impression that when the moment came, but I don't really know what happened, because it was also possible that he was, you know, depressed, and
Yeah.
that this was the reason that he decided to do it. We could also interpret it that, you know, the whole fight came to a certain point and it got resolved to some extent, and there was no clear way on where to go from now on. So it's possible that he also didn't see the motivation anymore, because, you know, when something is resolved, and you can have a lot of motivation when something is completely unresolved, and you keep on fighting until something happens. So I cannot say, it's complete speculation why this happened. Yeah, and I was on maternity leave at the time, so I didn't even follow so much what was happening.
Yeah, maybe you were not like that personally close to him.
And I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Not to him. I
imagine.
I made a conscious decision not to mix my personal life with my work life, because I saw
You
this
burn out.
happening.
You burn out.
And people got
burn out.
depressed as well because of that. I know several people who did not make this distinction, and they ended up, you know, on pills, and, you know, they keep taking antidepressants until the yeah exactly. So I made a conscious decision, and I wanted to protect myself.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was not the point. The point was that so first of all, the movement kind of dissolved. Erased people are getting old. Lots of them died already. So and the leaders, so the main leader basically died, who kept everything going. So this was one thing. The second thing is that the project money went out. So we had 4 projects. I led 4 projects. One was 3 years, then we got another one for 3 years, and then we had 2 one-year extensions. And then
all open society money.
Society. So it was 8 years of project funding from them for that particular issue. And then they said, this is not a priority anymore. We did a lot of work. It looks like things went somewhere. I mean, like, you know, ended up in some kind of remedies. So we don't really see what else you could do. And yeah, so they basically decided, and I was grateful for the opportunity. I never really resented that, because I was like, okay, yeah, you're
because
basically
you see
right,
the
and I
years,
agree.
yeah.
And I also agree. I mean, didn't even know where to continue. I mean, of course, we had a couple of ongoing cases that, I mean, not just a couple, like several tens of cases ongoing that we could continue to work with, yeah, to represent people and so on. But it really did come to a certain point where it was not really clear what else we could do that would be completely new, yeah. So I just said, yes, I completely understand, thank you, and we wrapped up our work when it comes to that. So this was also the reason.
This was in 2000.
So if it started in 2007 to 10, the first one, 11 to 13, the second one, 14, 15. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was the last year of the project, I think. Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah.
So this was the second thing. The fourth thing was the third thing was that we actually did manage to succeed in some way. So a huge milestone was the victory at the European Court of Human Rights.
Yes.
Because that actually killed the taboo of remedies being required for the erased people, especially the financial compensation. Because if you mention that in the past, you were considered crazy. Like completely crazy. Are you insane in that kind of way? Yeah?
That people can get reparations
For being erased. Like, oh, and now they want money? You know, in this kind of way.
Okay.
Yeah? So it was completely stigmatized. It was really, really hard. So we had to go, when we were talking about this before, we actually had to go to the explanations that, okay, if you hit your car, it's completely normal that an insurance company is going to cover for the damage of your little side, how you call it, steering mirror.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, you know.
I'm not sure how you call it, but yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I mean, it's normal, right? You get damage here, you get compensation. You have damage there, you get compensation. But your life is ruined. You cannot access anything anymore, and you don't get compensation. Are you serious? So we had to. I mean, really. I mean, come on. Are we talking 5-year-olds or what? You know, it was very hard. So this was the I would say this was the biggest milestone in terms of, you know, eliminating the stigma from the compensation part of the discussion. Yeah?
Although then the compensations, when you look at the amounts,
Yeah.
are like, and that's why you went on the second, like, on the sort of second, how do you say, like the class action. Also, it was like to ask for
more. That I was telling you about that already.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, that
yeah,
part,
exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, we said, okay, so now we have this victory. We have these 6 people who got large compensations from the European Court. Ordered by the European Court, and so then of course we had to monitor this law that was prepared in Slovenia. We were very critical about this law. We were advocating against it. We went to Strasbourg for a couple of times. Katarina, did you talk to Katarina already?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'll talk to her next week.
So Katarina was the one, because that was during my maternity leave, so she was the one who went to Strasbourg several times to basically present the arguments that this compensation is not sufficient, that this remedy should not be considered as an appropriate one to implement the decision, and so on. Yeah. So we continued wherever we could, but there was a certain point when we were like, okay, so apparently the Committee of Ministers that is supervising the implementation of the court decisions decided, properties that were the reason why they were happy with this remedy, general measure, is that there are so many decisions that are ignored. So many decisions of the European Court of Human Rights that are ignored by the state parties. So the Committee of Ministers is very happy if anything is done to implement the decision.
Yeah.
So this is the reason why, and the minister was going there and explaining.
Because
and
if you want to be in good standing with the EU, then you.
Another time. Okay.
How are you?
15 more minutes I have. Yeah.
Okay.
But 10 o'clock I need to be up. Yeah.
Okay. You want to put an alarm or something so that
way.
we. Okay.
Yeah. But we may want to continue. Yes.
Yes. So the reason why it was over is because you didn't see what else could be done.
I didn't see what else could be done. The money went out, so I cannot work on things that are not paid because it was my job. So if I wanted to, compile my salary, how it works in the NGO sector, private, non-profit sector, you have to get projects in order to have a salary. If you don't have that, then So we kept on. We kept the minimum, even though we didn't have any money anymore. We kept the phone line in terms of if people called. We continued to advise and so on, but we could not really take on any work. In terms of bring me your things. I'm going to write things for you. This is not possible anymore because you have other things to do. So very slowly, all those of us who were working on this had other, urgent things to do. So very slowly this topic became marginalized at the Peace Institute as well. And there were also not that many options anymore what we could do because the compensation scheme was there. We were informing people also on a massive scale with letters to all of our 2,000 contacts and in the media and so on to try to inform them. So now there is a compensation scheme. You have 3 years. Please apply for this. We know it's low, but this is all you have. So do it. Do it. At least you get 6,000 euros, if nothing else. Or 2,000 or whatever. But it's better than nothing. And then, if you can prove that you had more damage, like really with something very concrete, we can still try to find attorneys for you and we did actually look for attorneys. We concluded a contract with 3 of them who were willing to take on the cases if there was a need for further litigation, because you could go to court. You know that.
Yeah, you have the administrative
and then the legal, the judicial part. So we arranged for everything, yeah. But then, if you cannot really work on this systematically like before, then things are not, you know, yeah. So then I think that also I think this was also the reason, because the Peace Institute was no longer the main motor behind it. Then all the other NGOs also started to lose interest in this topic. I remember when Amnesty International said, okay, we're done, we're not working on the erased anymore, and I'm like, yeah, I understand, there's not much to do, yeah, and there are also many other things that we have to do, like the Roma and all that, so yeah, I think it came to the point where there was not much to do anymore, yeah. Even personally, I didn't really see anymore, because we also tried with the European Court to do this massive litigation, and they said, no, you first you have to win, you know, they sent us back to the national level and said, if you think the compensation is too low, first resolve it on the national level and then come to us again if you don't succeed, because it's limited, yeah. And so we were like, okay, but this takes another 6 years. Without money, we cannot do it, yeah. And since the funding ceased, it was like, okay, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. So I'm just trying to, you know, choose. Okay, one of my curiosities is, and this is like for you, you know, as more as an expert, I guess. Why this was not, or this is kind of not often portrayed, like I see here in the work, for example, that the Peace Institute has done, and even outside as an issue of statelessness, when it, like, these people were, like you say it in your book, right? Like a lot of them were actually de facto. Like, why is that not there? Like,
well, probably because I was the leader of all of these projects. It became really important to me that we are very precise.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, the Constitutional Court framed the discussion in the legal sense, framed the topic as the topic of a legal status issue, a legal status in the sense of permanent residence. And legally, if we are very specific, we know that the erasure actually meant the cancellation of the permanent residency status. And this is legally not the same as nationality or citizenship. Yeah? And when we were discussing this in Slovenia, we wanted Slovenia responsible, the state of Slovenia responsible for the violation that it has done. And the violation that Slovenia has done was the cancellation of permanent residency status, not the deprivation of citizenship. Okay?
Correct.
Because Slovenia did not deprive people of citizenship.
Yeah.
Okay? At least with the legislation that was related to the erased people, with the Citizenship Act of 1991 and with the Aliens Act of 1991. That leaves aside a little bit the nationality policies of the former Yugoslavia, where Slovenia was also part of. Of course, we know that. And as you know from my book, how the citizenship laws actually caused unclear citizenship situations in the time of former Yugoslavia that actually then carried on to the point of independence. So that's what. So what we actually we wanted to have this issue precisely formulated, because we didn't want to continue to confuse the public opinion that this is about citizenship, because it wasn't. It wasn't possible to legally claim from the state to offer citizenship to these people, but it was legally possible to claim for the state to provide permanent resident status. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So legally, it was very important how you frame it. If you framed it as citizenship, you wouldn't get anywhere.
So it was
anywhere.
sort of a strategic decision in terms of like speak the same language of the
Yes.
Constitutional Court,
Yes.
so that we understand
and
each other.
speak the same language as the Ministry of Interior, which was our main
Interlocutor
for all of this time. If we were going there talking about citizenship, they would
It's
know
much
that
more
we,
scary. Is that am I understanding
but
it
also
correctly?
we would be dismissed as if we don't understand what's actually the case. But because we constantly talked and really paid attention, I was really cautious about this. Consistently talk about the same thing. They knew they had a opponent who understands the details of this whole topic.
Okay.
Because I noticed and I know that people from social sciences and political sciences understand statelessness in a much broader way, as you said before. So I know about Jelka's writing the statelessness issue in Slovenia. I know about Kurnik's writings, the statelessness issue. I know about all of that, and I left that to them.
Yes, I understand.
It's your issue. It's your idea of how you understand it, and it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you fight legally, you have to be specific. You cannot. And one thing also, you cannot. So the right to citizenship is not justiciable.
Okay.
Yeah, you cannot go to court and claim the right to citizenship. It doesn't exist. Citizenship in law is considered to be a privilege given
So
to
it
you
is
by the
actually,
state.
yeah.
Unless you are a child, that's different, because as a child you're protected from statelessness, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child is the only international legal instrument valid in Slovenia that actually
You know what? I'm just laughing because often when I, speak with people in social sciences, or people who are expecting me to, to talk in terms of social sciences, that's exactly what I think citizenship ends up being. In fact, it's not just like a legal, right? This is how it actually works.
Yeah. The state has a discretion.
Yeah. So and I always
no right.
get this thing where it's like, oh, that means that for some to have it, some others need to not have it, and it's like, yeah, that's exactly to me what it means. If we all have the privilege, it's not a privilege anymore, right?
Yeah.
So, but
right.
it's funny how we come from different places, but in that, I see your point. I might think that's not the desirable way to see it, but it's certainly how it actually operates, in my opinion too. So it's like in my view, in what I see happening.
Yeah. So when you analyze the whole thing, you come to a conclusion that it's not about citizenship, it's about permanent residency status. And a large majority of the people from the group of the erased people had a citizenship of one former republic of former Yugoslavia. So you cannot call them stateless. It's incorrect.
Yes,
to do
I understand.
So if we did that, we would be blurring the whole situation, and we would not be taken seriously by the main interlocutors that we had on the other side. So you have to be specific, and if you go to court, you have to be specific. You cannot come with some generalizations, even though you might think they're correct. You cannot do that because you cannot win this way. So that's the main reason why. But and then that's why I actually, in my PhD, I said I have to look into this issue very closely. I have to figure out what the hell is happening with the statelessness issue within the erased. So I think I found some kind of
I found your
way.
explanation in the book really, because I've read it several times. I think I need to read it a lot more times to
It's a lot,
because it's a lot of, I don't know. It's such a because then there's the fact of the jury, which is already, it's just a mess. It's very hard to follow for someone in law.
Because it's a mess, it's not actually taken seriously anymore. Like the UNHCR, which is also mandated not just for refugees but for stateless people as well, they are done with the de facto citizenship, statelessness. Done with that.
I'm very interested in that.
They are like, this is not useful. What does it mean? Either you are or you're not stateless. Yeah, there's a definition of statelessness. So maybe there's a question of whether you really are stateless. So they prefer to call this situation a risk of statelessness.
Yeah, I see that.
So there might be situations when it's not clear yet whether there is any country in the world that considers you your citizen or not. So there is a risk of it. Maybe you have to clarify. Maybe you have to check the laws of the two countries, for instance, that might consider you. and see if there's something you can do, maybe report yourself to like register somewhere, and you become, there are very different laws, so there are so many different ways in how you can get citizenship like worldwide.
Yeah.
So they are like, you have to check. I mean, each case is individual. Of course you have communities where this is a massive problem, but when you have individual cases, it's important to check. And then we have a definition which says statelessness is, with no country in the world considers you by the application of the law. Yeah.
Yes.
So you have to check what's happening with the application of the law. And they say, okay, so then you are or you're not. So if you are, then we cannot talk about de facto. Okay, we can say, okay, you're national, but the state doesn't give you your passport. And this is this is a precise definition. And I also operate with the word de facto statelessness a lot because it's helpful in terms of saying, okay, so what does it help you if Serbia considers somebody a national but doesn't issue the passport, doesn't recognize this, doesn't recognize that? I mean, it's like non-existent, yeah? So in social sciences, I would say it's a useful concept because you can describe something with it, but legally it's completely useless, yeah? So I wanted to get to the bottom of this, so that's why I looked into these nationality laws of the former Yugoslavia, and I found this problem when I could see how because Yugoslavia wanted to be the melting pot of all the nationalities, they actually had this solution that when somebody is born to parents, for instance, from Bosnia in Slovenia no longer informs Bosnia that this baby was born, but uses its own citizenship book to say this child is a national of Bosnia and Herzegovina, not ever reporting this fact to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So that's how I figured out that people born after 1965,
because
until a certain point, that's how
central,
So legally, you have to come to the bottom of it. Otherwise, you just keep circling in, some kind of discussions, and you can analyze it a lot, but you don't really get to any answers. Why did some certain things actually happen? Yeah.
Okay. Yes. It's super. I have. I would talk for hours about this, but no. I want to be mindful of your time. So there were other situations. Just because we were talking about the terms, and there were other people apparently that. I mean, this is something that I hadn't seen written. Like Maya was bringing this up, and I wanted to ask you about this. People who went through the same process of, being erased somehow, except that maybe they were not permanent residents at the time that they were supposed to be, according to the state, to recognize them as a race, which is like pretty crazy, right? That then you needed a document saying, we erased you. So now that you prove to us that we committed a crime, we can compensate you. But so there were groups that went through similar procedures. Like, do you have a sense of like how big this was? Was this ever something you consider working on? Do you think it's something that it would have been worth looking at?
It was probably a pretty big group, especially because there were different numbers that circled around about the number of people affected by the independence of Slovenia. Yeah, and these numbers were much, much bigger than 25,000. That's the official number today, right?
Yeah.
So the numbers were, I don't even remember them anymore, but some went over 100,000.
Yeah,
so
I saw that too. Yeah,
it is possible that, but it's hard to say what actually happened to these people. Probably they had very different, destinies. We did meet many of them during our work because they came and, they told us, I don't officially fit into this category because I wasn't even registered for, as a permanent resident at the time. The problem was that we couldn't do much for them, yeah? So I think they didn't even try, resolving many things, especially after such a long time. If they tried something, they did in the early 90s.
Okay.
And many of them did succeed because it was possible to get statuses at the time as well. Yeah? Especially if you had a job and so on. It wasn't usually a problem. So it wasn't usually such a big problem. Yeah? It could be, but many succeeded. Many had their residence regulated in a year or two. Yeah? according to, depending on the circumstances of an individual, yeah, and when they found out and so on. Yeah?
Do you know of anybody who's done work on that
No,
here?
no.
You
No.
never saw
and
anything.
The more time passed, the less work was done,
yeah.
not more.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that Jasminka Dedic, the one who wrote the chapter in the first book.
Yeah.
I think she was the one who was the most focused on that at the time.
Okay. Okay. Good to know.
Maybe
okay.
Ilka also, because they were working at the same time. They just
Okay.
had different methodologies. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
Because when I took over when I got involved, my goal was really focused on what we can do with the existing mechanisms that are out there. Yeah? And for people who were not permanently registered, there were no mechanisms. There was no constitutional court decision. They didn't even, have a chance to complain so much. Yeah, because everything evolved around the permanent resident status. Permanent resident status. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not de facto living in Slovenia. I mean, this was useless. Yeah. As a circumstance
it's
of
like
a person.
in order to defend
legally
that
claim
thing,
something,
you have to leave out everything that can kind of threaten that
exactly.
argument.
Yeah. Strategically.
Yeah. So you have to create you have to create homogeneous groups in order to homogeneous enough that you can claim there's a pattern here. There's
one
a system.
Group. Yeah.
One group, or it has to be by groups, right? It's like
in categories, because the law functions in categories.
Yeah. It's clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last one,
Okay.
because I don't know, I wanna.
Like 16 minutes.
Are we good?
We're the last one. Yes.
The last one is just if you had to say, okay, the erasure was an issue of ...
Human rights violations.
You're going to say that.
Yeah, because that's my thing.
That's how you say it.
Yeah.
So the solution is ...
There are lots of solutions. I mean, the solutions, we were always thinking about several levels of solutions. Yeah, from the apology, official state apology, to reparations, to positive measures. There are a couple of positive measures now which are part of this compensations law, but they're not sufficient. So I would say even more positive measures would be required. Inclusion of this topic in school.
So for the future.
Yeah, there is
right?
one element when it's already included in the school textbook somewhere, 7th grade, I think. But it's not enough. It should be more. So yeah, and keeping the public memory. So it would be very good if one of the museums, for instance, had a permanent.
So it's an issue of memory as well.
Exposition, about that. I think that would be very important.
I guess it's in a way you're...
Like any other, when a state comes to terms with their past, they keep this somewhere and they, keep returning to it in order to keep the memory alive. Like, I don't know, native populations in
The thing is
Canada,
that the jumping time is so short, right?
Yeah,
compared to
short.
the other cases.
So there are many levels of solutions, not just the legal, the reparations one for sure. Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I have so much more,
I know.
but